A single dad who lost his wife runs a small bakery. One stormy night, a scared 19-year-old mother with twin babies runs into his shop. She is escaping from her cruel in-laws who hit her and want to take her babies. Neither knows this meeting will change their lives forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The crash of breaking glass echoed through the empty bakery as Mark Wilson dropped a tray of mugs. He cursed under his breath, the pain in his hand nothing compared to the ache in his heart. Today marked 5 years since he lost his wife to cancer, leaving him to raise their son Ethan alone. The bakery, once their shared dream, had become both his prison and lifeline, a daily reminder of all he had lost. "Dad? Are you okay?" called Ethan, now 13, rushing from the back room. Mark forced a smile, hiding the trembling in his hands. "Just clumsy. Don't worry about it." Ethan's concerned expression said he wasn't fooled. The boy had grown too serious too soon, shouldering burdens no child should carry. Mark had tried dating once, a year ago, but ended it when he saw how anxiously Ethan monitored their interactions, desperate for it to work yet terrified of another loss. "I'm fine really," Mark insisted, sweeping up glass shards. "Just a rough day." Rain pounded against the windows as thunder cracked overhead, matching Mark's dark mood. The bank had called again about the loan payment. 3 months behind now. If things didn't turn around soon, they might lose the bakery, the last connection to his wife. "Dad, I finished wiping down the tables," Ethan said, hanging up his apron. "We should go. The storm's getting worse." "Just need to count the register," Mark replied, though he already knew the total would be disappointing. Ever since the new chain bakery opened across town, customers had dwindled. The bell above the door jingled violently as it was flung open, causing both to look up in alarm. A young woman stumbled in, completely soaked and gasping for breath. She clutched 2 small bundles wrapped tightly against her chest, looking over her shoulder as if expecting pursuit. Her face was streaked with tears, a fresh bruise forming on her cheek, and her thin jacket hung in tatters. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Help us. They're looking for us." Mark immediately tensed, noticing her trembling hands and the fear in her eyes. "Who's looking for you?" "My in-laws," she whispered, glancing back at the door. "They tried to take my babies. When I wouldn't let them, his father, he..." Her hand touched the bruise on her face. The bundles in her arms began to cry, tiny wails cutting through the tension. As she shifted them, Mark realized they were babies, twin girls no more than a few months old. "They said I'm an unfit mother," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "They have lawyers, connections with the police. They'll say I kidnapped my own children. Please, I have nowhere else to go." Mark hesitated. For all he knew, this woman could be dangerous, unstable. The last thing he needed was more trouble. But the desperation in her eyes and the protective way she held those babies. "Ethan, lock the door," he said finally, "and pull down the blinds." The young woman nearly collapsed with relief. "Thank you. I swear I wouldn't involve you if I had any other choice." Mark guided her to a chair, noticing how she winced with each movement. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she insisted, though she couldn't hide her grimace as she sat. Mark exchanged a worried look with Ethan, who hovered nearby, uncertain. "I'll get some ice for your face," the boy offered, disappearing into the back. "Can I?" Mark gestured to the babies who continued to cry. "I have some experience." After a moment's hesitation, she carefully transferred one of the infants to his arms. The tiny girl's cries softened as Mark gently rocked her. "I'm Mark," he said. "That's my son Ethan." "Sarah," she replied, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Sarah Chin. I'm 19. These are Lily and Rose." Ethan returned with an ice pack wrapped in a towel. Sarah pressed it to her cheek with a grateful nod. "Your in-laws did this to you?" Mark asked, keeping his voice calm despite the anger building inside him. "Your in-laws did this to you?" Mark asked, keeping his voice calm despite the anger building inside him. Sarah nodded. "My husband died in a car accident when I was 7 months pregnant," she began, voice shaking. "His parents took me in, but they only wanted the babies. They're wealthy, influential. Harold Chin owns half the real estate in town." Mark's stomach dropped. The chance. Everyone knew that family. If she was telling the truth, she was in serious trouble. "Today they gave me an ultimatum, sign papers giving them custody or get out. When I refused, Harold got angry. He'd never hit me before, but..." She touched her bruise again. "I grabbed the girls and ran. They'll be looking for us." One of the twins began to fuss, and Sarah shifted to comfort her. "Do you have family you can stay with?" Mark asked. Sarah shook her head. My parents disowned me when I got pregnant at 19. We weren't married yet. They're very traditional. What about friends? We moved to this town for my husband's job right before the accident. I don't know anyone here. Mark and Ethan exchanged a look. The boy gave a small nod. You can stay with us tonight, Mark offered. We have a spare room. Just until you figure things out. Sarah looked up, suspicious and hopeful at once. Why would you help a complete stranger? Mark thought about his late wife, how she never turned away someone in need. Because someone once helped me when I needed it most. Sometimes a little kindness makes all the difference. Little did Mark know that his simple act of kindness that stormy night would change all their lives forever. The miracle that was waiting for them remained hidden, like a seed planted in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Mark's spare room was actually his home office, hastily cleared to make space for Sarah and the twins. He dragged in the old crib from the attic, the one Ethan had used as a baby, and set it up for the twins to share. It's not much, he apologized. It's perfect, Sarah replied, laying the sleeping babies down. Thank you. That night, as Mark lay awake listening to the storm, he wondered what Sarah's in-laws were like. What kind of people would throw a grieving young mother and two babies out into a storm? The thought made his blood boil. In the morning, Mark found Sarah already awake, feeding one baby while the other lay nearby. I hope they didn't keep you up all night, she said. Not at all. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, she admitted. At my in-laws, I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Over breakfast, Sarah shared more of her story. Her husband, David, had been the only son of Harold and Eleanor Chin, wealthy owners of a real estate company. They had never approved of David marrying Sarah, whom they considered beneath their social standing. After David died, they only let me stay because of the babies. Harold wanted grandsons to carry on the family name, but when the twins were born, she trailed off. They were girls, Mark finished. Sarah nodded. They were disappointed but still wanted custody. Yesterday, Harold had papers drawn up. He offered me money to disappear from the girls' lives. When I refused, Eleanor called me an ungrateful nobody who couldn't possibly raise proper Chin heirs. Mark's hands tightened around his coffee mug. That's terrible. The worst part is they're powerful in this town. Harold has friends everywhere. The police chief, the mayor. I'm afraid they'll try to take the girls anyway. They can't just take your children without cause, Mark said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. They can if they convince everyone I'm an unfit mother. No job, no home, no family support. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. What if they're right? What if I can't give my girls what they need? Hey, Mark said firmly. You walked away from comfort and security rather than give up your daughters. That sounds like a good mother to me. Sarah wiped her eyes. Thank you. For everything. We'll be out of your hair soon, I promise. There's no rush, Mark assured her. Stay as long as you need to get back on your feet. Later that morning, when Sarah was napping with the twins, Ethan approached his father in the kitchen. Dad, are they really going to stay with us? Mark hesitated. For a little while. Is that okay with you? Ethan thought for a moment. Yeah. The babies are kind of cute. And Sarah seems nice. She reminds me a little of Mom, the way she smiles. Mark's heart squeezed at the comparison. He hadn't noticed it himself, but Ethan was right. Sarah had the same quiet strength that had drawn him to his late wife. Just for a few days, Mark reminded himself as much as Ethan. Just until she finds a place of her own. A few days turned into a week. Mark helped Sarah apply for emergency assistance and look for affordable apartments, but nothing suitable was available. Meanwhile, she insisted on earning her keep, helping in the bakery while the twins napped in the back office. To Mark's surprise, Sarah had a natural talent for baking. Her cinnamon rolls quickly became a customer favorite. Where did you learn to bake like this? Mark asked one evening as they closed up shop. My grandmother taught me. Before she passed away, we spent every Sunday baking together. Sarah smiled at the memory. It was the only time my parents couldn't criticize me. They were too busy eating everything we made. As they worked side by side in the bakery, Mark found himself looking forward to their conversations. Sarah was smart and funny with a quiet determination that impressed him. And watching her with the twins, the gentle way she handled them, how she sang Korean lullabies her grandmother had taught her, stirred something in his heart he thought had died with his wife. 1 month after Sarah arrived on his doorstep, Mark realized she and the twins had become part of their lives. Ethan had appointed himself the twins' honorary big brother, making funny faces to make them laugh and helping with feedings. The spare room now permanently housed a crib and changing table. The refrigerator displayed the twins' handprints in bright paint, their first artwork, as Ethan had proclaimed it. But the shadow of the Chens still loomed. Sarah jumped whenever the bell above the bakery door rang, fearing her former in-laws had found her. Mark wanted to reassure her that everything would be okay, but he knew the reality. Wealthy families like the Chens usually got what they wanted. Then came the day Mark had been dreading. Harold and Eleanor Chen walked into the bakery 15 minutes before closing time. Their expensive clothes and haughty expressions immediately set them apart from the usual customers. Mark saw Sarah freeze behind the counter, her face draining of color. "There you are," Eleanor said coldly. "I see you found yourself a situation." Harold stepped forward. "This has gone on long enough, Sarah. We've been generous, giving you time to come to your senses. Now it's time to do what's best for the girls." Sarah's hands trembled as she untied her apron. "The best thing for my daughters is to be with their mother." "A mother with no means to support them? Living off the charity of strangers?" Eleanor scoffed. "How long do you think this baker will keep you around once the novelty wears off?" Mark felt anger rising in his chest. "Mrs. Chin, with all due respect, Sarah and her daughters are welcome here for as long as they choose to stay." Harold turned his attention to Mark. "And who exactly are you to interfere in family matters?" "I'm someone who believes children belong with parents who love them, not with people who see them as possessions." Harold's face reddened. "We can provide our granddaughters with everything they could ever need, the best schools, the best opportunities. What can you offer?" "Love," Sarah said firmly. "Respect. The chance to grow up knowing their worth isn't tied to their gender or social status." "Enough of this nonsense," Eleanor snapped. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a manila envelope. "Our lawyer drew up custody papers. Sign them and we'll provide you with enough money to start over somewhere else. Refuse and we'll see you in court." Sarah backed away. "I won't sign anything. They're my daughters." "Be reasonable," Harold insisted. "You're a single mother with no job, no permanent address. Do you really think a judge will side with you over us?" Mark stepped between them. "Sarah has a job. She's been working at the bakery for weeks. And she has a permanent address, my house." The Chens looked at him in disbelief. "Furthermore," Mark continued, "she has witnesses who can testify to her excellent parenting skills and the loving environment she provides. Meanwhile, I wonder what a judge would think about grandparents who threw a mother and 2 infants out during a thunderstorm." Eleanor's perfectly composed face faltered. "We did no such thing. She left voluntarily after a disagreement. That's not how Sarah tells it. And I believe her." Mark crossed his arms. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my bakery. You're going to stop harassing Sarah. And if you want to be part of your granddaughters' lives, you'll do it on Sarah's terms, with respect and kindness." Harold's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I do," Mark replied calmly. "You're bullies who think money and connections can get you whatever you want. But not this time." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Eleanor tugged on her husband's sleeve. "Harold, let's go. This isn't over." As they turned to leave, Sarah called out, "Wait." She stepped forward, facing her in-laws directly. "David would be ashamed of how you've treated us. Your son loved me and he would have wanted his daughters raised with love, not obligation. If you can accept that, then maybe someday you can be part of their lives." Harold paused at the door. For a brief moment, something like grief crossed his face. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked out without another word. When they were gone, Sarah collapsed into a chair, shaking. "They'll be back. With lawyers." Mark sat beside her. "Probably. But we'll be ready." "We?" Sarah looked up at him. "If you'll let me, I'd like to help you fight this. Not just as your employer or landlord, but as someone who cares about you and the girls." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why risk getting caught in the crossfire?" Mark took her hand. "Because in the short time you've been here, you've brought light back into our lives." Ethan smiles more. "The bakery feels alive again. And I." He paused, finding the right words. "I've started to hope for things I thought weren't possible anymore." The Chens did return with lawyers just as Sarah feared. They filed for emergency custody, claiming Sarah was unstable and unable to provide for the twins. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. During those weeks, the bakery became command central for what Ethan called Operation Save the Twins. Mark's customers, learning of Sarah's situation, rallied around her. One regular, a retired family court judge, offered legal advice. Another, who worked at the local newspaper, ran a story about the young mother fighting to keep her children against wealthy in-laws. The story caught the attention of a pro bono legal aid organization that specialized in family law. They agreed to represent Sarah, assembling evidence of her competence as a mother and the stable environment she provided. The night before the hearing, Sarah put the twins to bed and found Mark sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing notes from their lawyer. "What if we lose?" she asked, the fear she'd been hiding all day finally surfacing. Mark looked up. "We won't. But if we do, then we appeal. We keep fighting." He set the papers aside. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." She sat down across from him, bracing herself for bad news. "These past weeks, watching you stand up to the Chens, seeing your strength and courage, I've realized something." Mark took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you." Sarah's eyes widened. "I know the timing is terrible," he continued quickly, "and I don't expect you to feel the same way. After everything you've been through, the last thing you need is—" "Mark," she interrupted softly, "I'm falling for you too." For the first time since she'd known him, Mark was speechless. Sarah reached across the table for his hand. "When I showed up at your bakery that night, I was broken. You and Ethan didn't just give us shelter. You helped me find my strength again. You made me believe we deserved better." "You do deserve better," Mark insisted. "And whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that Ethan and I are here for you and the girls. Not out of obligation, but because we've become a family." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Let's win tomorrow. Then we can figure out what comes next." The courtroom was intimidating with its high ceilings and formal atmosphere. The Chens sat on one side with their expensive lawyer looking confident. Sarah, Mark, Ethan, and their legal team sat on the other, the twins sleeping peacefully in their carrier. As the hearing began, the Chen's lawyer painted Sarah as an immature, unstable young woman who had trapped their son into marriage and now couldn't provide for his children. He emphasized the Chen's wealth, social standing, and ability to give the twins advantages Sarah never could. When it was their turn, Sarah's lawyer presented a different picture. A devoted mother who chose her children's well-being over financial security, evidence of her stable employment and living situation, character references from customers at the bakery, and most damaging to the Chen's case, testimony from the Chen's former housekeeper who witnessed them throwing Sarah and the babies out during the storm. Throughout the proceedings, Mark held Sarah's hand, a steady presence beside her. When it was her turn to speak, she addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I know I'm young. I know I don't have wealth or influence. But I love my daughters with everything I have. Their father would have wanted them raised with love, not treated as replacements for the sons my in-laws wanted." Her voice grew stronger. "I've created a stable home for them. I have a job I love, a support system, and plans for our future. All I'm asking is the chance to be the mother my girls deserve." The judge listened carefully, asking questions of both parties. Finally, he cleared his throat. "In my years on the bench, I've seen many custody battles. Usually they're between parents. This case is unusual and frankly troubling." He looked directly at the Chens. "Grandparents certainly have rights, but they do not supersede a fit parent's rights without extraordinary circumstances." Sarah held her breath. "I see no evidence that Miss Chen is unfit. On the contrary, she has demonstrated remarkable resilience and commitment to her children's well-being, even in difficult circumstances. Therefore, I am denying the petition for grandparent custody." Relief flooded through Sarah. Mark squeezed her hand as tears spilled down her cheeks. The judge wasn't finished. "However, I do believe children benefit from knowing their extended family. So I am granting the grandparents visitation rights, supervised initially, with the possibility of unsupervised visits in the future if they demonstrate good faith." Harold Chen's face was stony, but Eleanor's expression softened slightly as she looked at the twins. "Your Honor," she said unexpectedly, "may I say something?" The judge nodded. Eleanor turned toward Sarah. We were wrong to treat you the way we did. Grief made us desperate to hold on to anything of David. But seeing you fight for the girls today," her voice broke. "It's what our son would have done. He would be proud of you." The courtroom fell silent. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. 1 year later, the bell above the bakery door jingled merrily as Sarah entered, pushing a double stroller. The twins, now 15 months old, babbled excitedly when they spotted Mark behind the counter. "There are my girls," he said, coming around to lift them from the stroller. "Did you have fun with Grandma and Grandpa Chin?" "They did," Sarah confirmed. "Eleanor even mentioned they might take them to the aquarium next weekend. If that's okay with us." "Of course it is." Mark kissed her cheek. How are you feeling? Sarah placed a hand on her slightly rounded belly. Good. The morning sickness is finally easing up. So much had changed in a year. After the custody hearing, the relationship between Sarah and the Chens had slowly mended. It wasn't perfect, but they were trying, for the twins' sake and for David's memory. Meanwhile, Sarah had become a full partner in the bakery, her recipes bringing in new customers daily. She and Mark had married in a small ceremony 6 months earlier, with Ethan proudly serving as best man and the twins as flower girls. Now they were expecting a new addition to their blended family. Ethan's upstairs finishing his homework, Mark said. He wants to show you his science project before dinner. Sarah smiled. I can't wait to see it. As they closed the bakery together that evening, Mark, Sarah, Ethan, and the twins, Sarah thought about the desperate young mother who had stumbled through that door in a thunderstorm, with nothing but her babies and the clothes on her back. She had been looking for temporary shelter, never imagining she would find a permanent home. What are you thinking about? Mark asked, noticing her thoughtful expression as they walked home. About how sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you really need. She linked her arm through his. And how the darkest storms can lead to the brightest rainbows.